Millionaire sees street girl feeding his wheelchair-bound son and changes his life. Richard Davidson suddenly stopped his car when he saw a scene that made his heart race. There, in the central square of Denver, a barefoot girl was tenderly feeding a little boy in a wheelchair. The boy had those same light blue eyes, the same wavy blonde hair. Richard felt his legs tremble. It couldn't be. It had been 3 years since he'd seen Matthew, his son. 3 years since he'd run away from that life, from that responsibility he couldn't bear. The girl who couldn't have been more. Then 8 years old, gently wiped the boy's face with a torn cloth while whispering something that made him smile. "There you go, Matty. One more bite, come on. You need to stay strong," said little Emily, holding the makeshift plastic spoon. Richard stepped out of his luxury car without thinking. His steps were hesitant, his heart pounding in his chest. The closer he got, the more certain he became. It was Matthew, his Matthew, the boy born with cerebral palsy, the one he hadn't had the courage to raise. "Sis M, it's yummy," the boy mumbled with difficulty, that familiar way of speaking Richard knew so well. The girl smiled, her brown eyes shining with genuine joy. Her clothes were patched, her bare feet dirty from the street dust, but there was something about her that radiated purity. She scooped another bit of food from the foam plate and continued feeding the boy with endless patience. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Richard hid behind a tree, tears streaming uncontrollably. How had his son ended up here? The last time he'd seen him was at that private clinic in Cherry Hills, where he paid a fortune every month so he wouldn't have to look into his eyes every day, so he wouldn't have to face the reality of having a special needs child. "Mr. Richard, are you okay?" Amanda, his secretary, appeared concerned. "The meeting with the Japanese investors starts in 15 minutes. He gestured for her to be quiet, his eyes fixed on the scene. Emily was now brushing Matthew's hair away from his face with her small hand. The gesture was so maternal, so full of care, that Richard felt a pang of envy. A street child showed more love for his son than he ever had. "Cancel everything," he murmured. "But sir, that contract is worth millions." "I said cancel it." His voice came out harsher than he'd intended. Amanda stepped back, startled. Richard kept watching. Emily noticed she was being watched and immediately pulled Matthew protectively close. Her little eyes narrowed with suspicion. Struggling, she began pushing the old rusty wheelchair away. "Come on, Matty, let's go home," she said, fighting against the weight of the chair. Home? What home? Richard followed them discreetly, his heart tightening with every step. They crossed several streets, Emily stopping now and then to rest her thin little arms. Matthew hummed a slightly off-key tune, oblivious to the girl's effort. They arrived at an underpass in the east side. Beneath it, among cardboard boxes and old blankets, was their home. Richard had to lean against a lamppost to keep from collapsing. His son, the heir to a business empire, was living under an overpass. Emily carefully settled Matthew onto a torn mattress on the ground. She took a thin blanket and covered him, even in the July heat of Denver. The boy closed his tired little eyes. "Tell me the prince story, sis," he asked. "Again," Emily smiled. "Okay. Once upon a time there was a very special prince. He didn't walk like the other princes, but he had the kindest heart in the kingdom." Richard walked away, unable to take any more. He rushed to his car and drove aimlessly through the city. How had this happened? He grabbed his phone and called the clinic in Cherry Hills. "Hope Treatment Center, good afternoon. This is Richard Davidson. I need to speak about my son, Matthew Davidson." There was an awkward silence on the other end. "Mr. Davidson, the clinic closed 2 years ago. Financial problems. We thought you had been notified." "What? And the children? Where did they go?" "They were transferred to public institutions. We tried contacting the guardians, but many never responded." Richard hung up, bile rising in his throat. 2 years. His son had been on the streets for 2 years and he hadn't even known. Too busy expanding his business, traveling the world, running from the guilt eating him inside. The next day, he returned to the underpass. This time, he brought a basket of food and new clothes. He left everything near the spot, but when he came back hours later, nothing had been touched. Emily and Matthew were gone. He spent days searching. He visited parks, shelters, assistance centers. Nothing. It was as if they had vanished. Guilt consumed him. He couldn't work, couldn't sleep. The image of Emily feeding Matthew haunted him. A week later, he found them by chance. They were near Central Market. Emily was collecting cans while Matthew waited in his wheelchair, playing with a patched-up rag doll. Richard approached slowly. "Hi," he said, his voice trembling. Emily immediately stepped between him and Matthew, her little eyes flashing with anger. "Go away, mister. We didn't do anything wrong. I just want to help." "We don't need. Do we manage?" She lifted her chin, too proud for such a small child. Who is it?" Matthew tried to peek behind her. "No one important. Just some annoying guy." Emily started pushing the wheelchair. Richard followed. "Please wait, I know you." Emily stopped and turned, her little face scrunched up. "What do you mean? We've never seen you." Richard swallowed hard. He couldn't just say, "I'm the father who abandoned this boy." Not yet. "I saw you at the park the other day. I was impressed by how much you care for him." Emily relaxed slightly, but stayed wary. "Matthew's my brother. Not by blood, but in my heart. I've been taking care of him for a long time." "How long?" "Since I found him alone in that awful place. He was crying, hungry, all dirty. No one wanted him because he's special. But I saw he just needed love." The words stabbed Richard's chest. A street child had given his son what he had denied, unconditional love. "And your parents?" Richard asked. Emily shrugged. "Never knew them. Grew up in the orphanage till I ran away. They hit us there. Out here's better. At least I'm free to take care of Matthew. It must be hard, yeah, but when he smiles it's all worth it." She looked at Matthew with so much love that Richard had to turn away. Days passed. Richard started showing up regularly, always, with some excuse. He left food by accident. Found clothes they were throwing out. Emily accepted reluctantly, always making it clear it was for Matthew. One afternoon, Richard arrived to find Emily crying softly while Matthew slept. The wheelchair had a broken wheel. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "The chair broke. I don't know how I'll move him now. He's already heavy and without the chair." She wiped her tears with the back of her dirty hand. "Let me see." Richard examined the chair. It was an old model, patched up many times. A miracle it had lasted this long. "I can get a new one," he offered. "No!" Emily nearly shouted, then lowered her voice to avoid waking Matthew. "I don't want charity. I'll figure it out. It's not charity, it's like a loan. You can pay me back however you can." Emily studied him for long seconds, those brown eyes seeming to see right into his soul. "Why do you want to help so much? Who are you, really?" Richard opened his mouth to lie again, but the words wouldn't come. How could he explain to a child that he was the coward who had abandoned his own son? Someone who should have made the right choices and didn't, he finally said. Emily seemed to understand there was more to the story, but she didn't press. The next day, Richard showed up with a new wheelchair. It wasn't the most expensive model. He knew Emily well enough by now to know she'd refuse that. It was simple, but functional. "How much was it?" "I'll pay you back little by little," she said seriously. $100, Richard lied. It had cost $2,000. "Okay, I'll collect cans and pay you back. It might take a while, but I will." And so began a strange routine. Richard showed up almost every day. He brought food, talked with Emily, played with Matthew. The boy started growing fond of him, calling him Uncle Rich. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. One night, Richard arrived later than usual and found Emily rocking Matthew, who was burning with fever. The girl was desperate, placing wet cloths on his forehead. "How long has he been like this?" Richard asked, alarmed. "Since yesterday. But it'll pass." "It always does." Her voice trembled. "He needs a doctor." "No. If I take him to the hospital, they'll take him away from me. They'll say I'm too young, that I can't take care of him. I won't let them. Emily, he could get worse. Then help me here, but I'm not losing my brother. Richard ran to a pharmacy and returned with medicine, but the fever wouldn't break. Matthew was delirious, calling out names Richard didn't recognize. Suddenly the boy opened his glassy eyes and murmured, "Mommy, where's Mommy?" Emily stroked his little face. "Mommy became a little star, remember? But she asked me to take care of you. And I will, forever." Richard felt the ground vanish beneath him. Catherine was dead. His ex-wife, Matthew's mother, was dead? Emily, his mother, when? About 2 years ago, she showed up where we used to live before. She was really sick, so thin, she was looking for Matthew. When she saw him, she cried so much, Emily wiped her own tears. She stayed with us for 3 days. On the last day, she made me promise to take care of him. Said his father was no good, that he'd abandoned them. Then she became a little star. Richard ran outside. He vomited behind a pillar, his whole body shaking. Catherine had died searching for her son, the son he had abandoned, the son who was now burning with fever in the arms of a street kid. He came back determined. "Emily, listen to me. I'm going to call a doctor to come here. We won't go to the hospital. The doctor will come here, okay?" She hesitated, then nodded. Richard called his private doctor, offering triple the usual fee for an emergency visit. Within an hour, Dr. Michael arrived. "My God, Richard, what are you doing in a place like this?" "Just examine the boy, Michael, please." The doctor checked Matthew under Emily's watchful gaze. He diagnosed a severe respiratory infection. "He needs strong antibiotics and fluids. I can treat him here, but ideally, he'd be in a cleaner environment." "Do what you can right here," Richard said. As the doctor worked, Emily held Matthew's hand the whole time, whispering words of comfort. Richard watched, his chest tight. How had a child learned to love so deeply? The medicine took effect. The fever began to drop. Matthew slept more peacefully. The doctor left medication and instructions, promising to return the next day. When they were alone, Emily hugged Matthew and cried with relief. Richard stepped closer, and for the first time she let him hug her too. They cried together, united by their love for that special little boy. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was so afraid of losing him." "You'll never lose him, I promise." "You can't promise that. You're nothing to us." The words stung, but they were true. Richard took a deep breath. "Emily, I need to tell you something about who I really am." She pulled away, her defenses rising again. I'm Matthew's father." The silence was deafening. Emily stared at him, her eyes filling with understanding and rage. You're the bastard who abandoned him." "Emily, get out," she screamed. "Get out right now. Please, let me explain." "Explain what? That you threw your son away because he wasn't perfect? That you left him alone to rot in that horrible place?" She trembled with anger. "His mother told me everything. How you ran away. How you couldn't handle the pressure. Coward." I know I was a coward. You know nothing. Do you know how I found him? Tied to a bed, covered in sores, crying until he had no voice left. No one took proper care of him because his rich father never showed up to check. Every word was true. Richard fell to his knees. "Forgive me. I know I don't deserve it. But it's not my forgiveness you need, it's his." She pointed to Matthew. "But you know what? He doesn't even need you. He has me. And I will never, never abandon him." Emily lay down beside Matthew, holding him protectively. Richard stayed there on his knees, crying silently. After hours, he got up and left. But he came back the next day, and the day after that, and the next. Emily ignored him but didn't stop him from bringing food and medicine. Matthew slowly got better, unaware of the drama unfolding around him. One afternoon, Richard arrived to find the place empty. He panicked. He searched everywhere until he found them in a nearby park. Emily was making Matthew laugh with silly faces. "I thought you'd left," he said out of breath. "We still will, when Matthew is well enough to travel. Where to? Far from you. Emily, please, I messed up, I know. But let me try to fix it. Some things can't be fixed. Uncle Rich." Matthew saw him and smiled. "Sit here." Richard looked at Emily, asking for permission. She sighed and nodded. He sat down, and Matthew immediately struggled to climb into his lap. "Did you know Em is the best sister in the world?" one of the boys said. "I know, she really is. She takes care of me, feeds me, bathes me, tells me stories." "And what stories does she tell?" "About the special prince, the one who can't walk but flies with his heart." Matthew stretched out his little arms like wings. Richard looked at Emily. She turned away, blushing. "It's a beautiful story," Richard said. "Em made it up for me. She says I'm the prince. And you really are." They stayed there until sunset. Matthew fell asleep in Richard's arms. It was the first time in 3 years he'd held his son like that. Emily watched, the conflict clear in her eyes. "He likes you," she said softly. "I like him too. Love him, actually. I know it's too late, but why did you run away? Tell me the truth." Richard took a deep breath and told her about the devastating diagnosis, the fights with Catherine, the fear of not being strong enough, about the cowardice that made him choose the easy way out. "Catherine wanted to fight. She wanted to try every treatment. I only saw the suffering ahead. I couldn't imagine a life like that. I was selfish." "You really were," Emily agreed. "But you know what's worse? You had everything to give him a good life, money, a home, doctors, and you threw it away. I have nothing and I give him everything. You give him what matters most. Love. Love doesn't fill a belly. It doesn't buy medicine, but it keeps him alive. Matthew survived because of your love." Emily fell silent, absorbing his words. Matthew stirred in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. "So now what?" she asked. "Do you want to take him?" "I don't know. What do you think is best for him?" "Stay with me," he replied without hesitation. "Then stay. But let me help. Not as a father, I've lost that right, but as someone who wants what's best for him. And what do you get out of it? Maybe a little peace, maybe the chance not to be a complete failure." Emily studied him for a long time. There was something in her, a wisdom that didn't match her age. Maybe the streets did that, forcing kids to grow up too fast. "If I let you help, there are conditions," she said finally. "What are they?" "First, no trying to separate me from him. Ever. Second, he can't know you're his father. Not now. Third, if I tell you to disappear, you disappear. I accept. And fourth, you'll have to prove you've changed. Not with money, with presence." Richard agreed. The next day, he came with a proposal. "I found a small house to rent, 2 blocks from here. Nothing fancy, just the basics. What do you think?" Emily was tempted, he could see it. She looked at Matty, who was playing with pebbles on the ground. "How much is the rent?" $300. It was a lie. The rent was $2,000, but Richard would cover the difference. "I can help with 100. Collecting cans, doing odd job. I'll cover the rest. As payment for you taking care of Matty." "I'm not a maid." "That's not what I mean. It's like family help. Lots of people get help from family." "You're not our family." "Not yet," Richard said softly. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. They moved in a week later. It was a simple house, 2 bedrooms, but to Emily and Matty it was a palace. The girl cried when she saw the real bed, the bathroom with a shower, the small but equipped kitchen. Is it really ours?" she asked, disbelieving. "Yes, yours and Matty's." Matty explored everything in his wheelchair, his little eyes shining with joy. "Says there's a TV and a fridge and the toilet makes noise." Emily laughed, a light laugh Richard had never heard before. For a moment she was just a child discovering the world. The adjustment wasn't easy. Emily didn't fully trust him. She kept a backpack always ready, as if expecting to run at any moment. She wouldn't let Richard stay alone with Matty for too long. Richard enrolled them in school. It was a battle. Emily had never studied and had no documents. Matty needed a special school. But with some finesse and some money, he managed it. On the first day of school, Emily was terrified. "What if they don't let me pick him up? What if they hurt him?" "It'll be fine. The school is prepared for special kids. But they don't know him like I do. They don't know he likes his head rubbed when he's nervous, that he needs his little toy to sleep after lunch." Then you explain everything to the teacher. And she did. She gave a detailed list of everything about Matty. The teacher, Mrs. Wilson, was impressed. You're quite the sister, she told her. I'm the only family he has, Emily replied, giving Richard a meaningful look. Weeks turned into months. Richard kept his promise of presence. He took the kids to school, picked them up, helped with homework. Emily began to trust him, little by little. One night she called him to talk. Matty's been asking about his, father. Richard froze. Wait, what did you say? That his father went on a trip, but he's smart. He'll figure out it's a lie soon. What do you think we should do? I don't know. Part of me wants him to never find out, to keep thinking his father died or disappeared. It's less painful than the truth. That his father is a coward? That his father chose to abandon him? They fell silent, each lost in their thoughts. But you came back, Emily said suddenly. That counts for something. I came back too late. But you came back. Many don't even do that. It was the closest thing to forgiveness Richard had ever received. Moved, he held Emily's small hand. Thank you for taking care of him when I couldn't. I should be thanking you. Because of Matthew, I learned I could love. At the orphanage, they taught us not to get attached. That love was weakness. Matthew taught me its strength. The moment of truth came on an ordinary Saturday. They were at the park, Matthew playing in the sand with other kids. A boy pointed at Richard and said, "Your dad's cool." Matthew looked confused. He's not my dad, he's Uncle Rich. But he looks like your dad, he has the same nose. Matthew studied Richard's face, then turned to Emily. Em, does Uncle Rich look like me? Emily swallowed hard. A little, sweetheart. Why? Richard knelt in front of his son. Matthew, I need to tell you something. You might get mad, and that's okay. What? The boy grew uneasy. I'm your father. The silence was heavy. Matthew looked from Richard to Emily, trying to process it. My dad. But Em said my dad went away. I did. I went far away because I was scared. Scared of what? Of not being a good enough dad for you. Matthew stayed, quiet for a long time. Emily held his little hand, ready to comfort him. You left me? The question came out small, wounded. Yes, Richard didn't lie. And it was the worst thing I've ever done. Why did you come back? Because I saw your sister taking care of you, and I realized what I'd lost, the most special boy in the world. I'm not special, I'm disabled. You are. Special. Ask anyone who knows you. Matthew began to cry softly. Emily hugged him right away. It's okay, sweetheart. Cry. You have every right to. I always wanted a dad, Matthew sobbed, but now I don't know if I do. Richard felt the words like daggers, but he understood. It was fair. You don't have to want me as your dad. I can still be Uncle Rich. What matters is I'm here now, and I'm never leaving again. Promise? Matthew looked at him with tear-filled blue eyes. I promise. But more importantly, Emily's here, and she'll never leave you. Em's my real family, Matthew said, hugging Emily tighter. I know, and that's how it should be. The following months were slow rebuilding. Matthew wavered between moments of affection and distance with Richard. Emily mediated with wisdom beyond her years. Richard arranged the best treatments for Matthew: physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. The boy made remarkable progress. The day he took 5 steps on his own, everyone cried with joy. I did it, Em, I walked, Matthew shouted. You did, my prince. I always knew you could. Emily spun him in the air. Richard watched, moved. That moment wasn't his, it was theirs, belonging to the 2 siblings who chose each other. A year passed. Matthew now called him Dad sometimes, Uncle Rich other times. Richard accepted both. Emily had a birthday. They discovered she was 10, not 8 as they'd thought. They threw a simple party filled with love. Make a wish, Richard said as she blew out the candles. Emily closed her eyes, thought, and blew. When asked about her wish, she smiled mysteriously. I wished for our family to stay together forever. Our family? Richard asked, hopeful. Yeah, the 3 of us. A different kind of family, but family. That night, Richard found a drawing Matthew had made at school. 3 figures holding hands, a man, a girl, and a boy in a wheelchair. Below, written in shaky letters, "My family." He cried as he hadn't in years. He cried for the family he'd destroyed, for the wife who died searching for their son for the lost years, but he also cried with gratitude for Emily, the girl who saved his son, who saved him too. He found Emily in the kitchen, preparing Matthew's lunch for the next day. "Emily? Hi. You saved our lives, you know that, right?" She stopped what she was doing and looked at him. "No, you saved mine. Before Matthew, I was just a lost orphan. He gave me purpose. And you gave me the chance to be a kid again. I have a proposal. A question, actually." "Go ahead." "Do you want to be my daughter? Officially? I want to adopt you." Emily dropped the container she was holding. She froze, staring at him with wide eyes. But I'm already Matthew's sister. And you'll keep being that. But you can also be my daughter if you want." "Why? Why do you want this?" "Because you deserve to have a father, a real present father. And because I need you. To teach me how to be a dad, to keep me on the right path." Emily started to cry. For the first time since they'd met, she cried like the child she was. Richard hugged her and she let herself be held. Can I think about it?" she asked between sobs. "Of course. Take all the time you need." The answer came a week. Later, unexpectedly, Richard came home and found a piece of paper on the table, a drawing made by Emily. The same 3 figures from Matthew's drawing, but with one difference. Above their heads the names were written, Daddy, me, and my brother. Below, a single word. Yes. The adoption process was quick. Emily chose to keep her name, only adding the last name Davidson. On the day the official paperwork was finalized, they threw a party. "Now we're really siblings," Matthew cheered. "We always were, silly. Now there's just paper to prove it." Emily ruffled his hair. Richard watched his children, yes, his 2 children, and felt his heart burst with love. Life had taken unexpected turns. He'd lost one family out of cowardice and gained another through redemption. 2 years later, on an ordinary afternoon, the 3 of them were at the same park where it all began. Matthew, now walking with the help of braces, played on the playground. Emily, now 12, watched over him protectively as always. "Dad, look, I climbed up all by myself." Matthew shouted from the top of the slide. "Be careful, Matty." Emily ran to stand below, ready to catch him if needed. Richard smiled. Some things would never change. Emily would always be the overprotective sister. And that was just fine. An elderly woman approached. "Your children are beautiful," she remarked. "Thank you," Richard replied proudly. "The girl takes such good care of her little brother. You don't see that much these days." "It's true. She's special." "All children are special when they're loved," the woman said before walking away. Richard thought about her words. It was true. Matthew was special, not despite his limitations, but because of who he was. Emily was special, not despite her difficulty past, but because of her strength. "Dad, come play," Matthew called. "Go on, Dad, he's calling you," Emily smiled. Richard got up and went. He climbed the slide with Matthew, spun on the merry-go-round until they were dizzy, and played ball until the sun began to set. On the way home, Matthew fell asleep in Richard's arms. Emily walked beside him, pushing the empty wheelchair. You know," she said suddenly, "sometimes I think about his mother, about Catherine." Richard tensed. They rarely talked about Catherine. "What do you think?" "That she'd be happy. To see Matthew well taken care of. To see that in the end, everything worked out." "You really think so?" "I do. She asked me to take care of him. I kept my promise. And you came back. Late, but you came back." "Do you believe in forgiveness, Emily?" "I do. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It just lets you build a different future." "Have you forgiven me?" Emily stopped walking and looked at him. "The day I saw you holding Matthew, crying because he called you Dad for the first time, that day I understood that to err is human. What matters is having the courage to make things right." They arrived home. Richard tucked Matthew into bed. Emily helped remove his braces. Together they covered the boy and turned off the light. In the hallway, Richard held Emily's arm. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for proving people can change. You changed my life." No, Matthew changed our lives. He taught us how to love. It was true. A special boy, abandoned by his father, cared for by an orphan, had created a family. Imperfect, patched together, but real. Richard headed to his room but paused at Emily's door. She was writing in a notebook, focused. "What are you writing?" "The story of the special prince, to tell Matthew when he grows up." "Can I read it?" "Of course." Richard took the notebook and read. It was the tale of a prince who couldn't walk, abandoned by a cowardly king. A young peasant girl found him and cared for him with love. The king, remorseful, returned, but instead of taking the prince, he realized the boy belonged with the peasant girl. So he made her a princess, and the three lived happily ever after. "It's beautiful," Richard said, moved. "It's our story, but with a happy ending." "Our story has a happy ending." "It does, but it's not an ending. It's a beginning." Richard kissed Emily's forehead and went to bed. Through the window, he saw the same moon that had witnessed his son being fed by a street girl years ago, the same moon now shining on their reunited family. In the next room, Matthew murmured something in his sleep. Emily appeared at the door. "He's calling. He wants us both." They went together. Matthew's eyes were open, drowsy. "I had a nightmare that you both disappeared." "We'll never disappear," Emily assured. "Promise, Dad?" Matthew looked at Richard. "I promise. Forever." Matthew smiled and closed his eyes. Emily and Richard stood there, one on each side of the bed, watching over the boy who had brought them. Together. Outside, the city slept. But in that simple house, three hearts beat in harmony. A family born not of blood, but of love, of forgiveness, of the courage to start over. Richard looked at Emily. She looked back. No words were needed. The silence said it all. They were father and daughter. They were family. And so they would remain. Forever. The end of the story. So, dear listener, what did you think of Richard, Emily and Matthew's journey? Leave a comment if you also believe in the power of love and forgiveness. Like, subscribe, and share this story of triumph. Until the next emotional adventure.